Hello and welcome back to Blow Up the Team. Jeremy here today with Matt.
What's up?
How's your MLB 2K the show going, my guy?
It's going good. It's going interesting. They just loaded the bases because it was an interesting pitch selection by me where I wasn't looking and actually threw one right down the middle. But luckily, it was only a single, and so things are looking interesting. The San Francisco Giants currently have a 1-0 lead on the Dodgers. The year is 2029, or actually
2029.
2030 actually.
Oh my, this guy. Okay. Anyways, today we are going to be taking a look at the San Francisco 49ers and their 2020 NFL draft. I had to take my time because I started to say the Giants because I was looking at the video you
Today,
released
yesterday.
yesterday. Yep.
Actually, it's 100% the reason why I signed with the Giants. I said, well, the Giants seem to be the only team that is offering me, the biggest contract. Let's take them.
So it had nothing to do with the fact that we did the video yesterday. They were offering you the
Well, I mean,
biggest
it
contract.
definitely was influenced by. I was like I said, there's only three teams I auto reject. It's the Yankees, the Mets,
You auto
and
reject
the
the
Reds.
Yankees. What a fake
Are they,
fan.
the Astros, the Mets, and the Red Sox? And I already have two pitchers on the Yankees, so I figured my third pitcher will just go somewhere else anyway. And I waited, figured I'd see if I got anything. No bites. Then I had the choice between them, the Marlins, which actually I was very tempted to take, the Tigers, and fucking the Mets. And I'm not. So you know what? I just decided, let me go to San Fran. They have cool uniforms at home.
Alrighty then.
I'm sorry. This is like way too much explaining about the
Absolutely.
game
I
that has.
asked one simple question to call you out for the fact that you were playing the show while I was attempting to begin recording, and you just got off topic.
You've played Battlegrounds before.
I
That is
have played
far.
Battlegrounds before. Is that an issue for you?
Yinka,
No.
yinka, yinka. Oh,
Okay. Hello, Vivek.
something
Welcome
of
to the show.
recordation.
Welcome to the
Okay. I
show.
mean, you can definitely say definitely
Oh,
not
welcome to the
recording.
show, XAEA.
Okay, so I guess we've got the whole squad in here to listen to the video today. It's
Are
pretty
you
fun.
guys
Uh,
not done recording?
No,
no, we
but
just
it's
started.
currently running, so you can say hi.
We're currently running on a huge tangent to MLB the Show.
Yeah, we got
I
off
heard
topic.
about Battleground, so I
Well,
said yinka.
yeah, because I called him out for like playing the show while I was recording. Then we got off topic because he loves the show too much, and then he called me out for playing Battlegrounds. But anyways, before we get into today's video, as always, we do not own the clips to anything that I play, so the video will be linked in the description down below. So be sure to check that out. This has been a hell of a
Leave.
start. This has been a hell of a start, man.
This is the best start to a video we've ever had.
Definitely something else, I'll say that. Anyways, I'm leaving that in as well. I'm not editing that out. Leaving it in. Anyways, um, let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers. I don't think it needs to be said how good this team was last year. They were 13-3 in the regular season. They were in the Super Bowl. They were going to win, and then Patrick Mahomes happened. But they had an absolutely fantastic season. It's kind of hard not to be disappointed about coming so close and not finishing the deal, but lots of reasons to be hopeful out in San Fran. Their offense was kind. It's kind of always hard to tell when you're watching, highlights and I've watched most of the games on Red Zone, right? So I only see certain clips, and so it's kind of hard to tell really how like you could just normally tell that like that team is very strong. They got a solid offense and a solid defense. And they're fourth in yards per game. They just had an overall productive offense, but I was kind of surprised to see they were only 13th in passing yards per game, so they were kind of almost middle of the pack in that territory. Um, but they just had an absolutely outstanding rushing offense. They were second in rushing yards per game behind only the Ravens, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. And they were also second in points per game. So they were just a very productive offense. It always felt like they were threatening anytime that they had the football. And there was a lot of reason to believe that they had a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl from very early on in the season, and um, they just about did it. Unfortunately, they did lose Joe Staley pretty early on in the season when they were playing. I believe it's actually this game when they were playing the Bengals. I'm not sure if it's this game or I'm pretty sure it was when they were playing the Bengals. He broke his leg, and missed significant time, and he ultimately decided to retire after the season. Um, and they were forced to make a move, which we will talk about in a moment, to bring in Trent Williams to replace him. Another quick note: they did trade for Emmanuel Sanders. They will not have him this year. He is signed with the Saints, which leaves kind of Deebo Samuel alone on that wide receiving core. Not alone, but he's definitely the most notable player on that wide receiving core. Moving on to the defense, they were second in yards allowed per game, first in passing yards allowed per game, and 17th in rushing yards allowed per game. So they had an absolutely stifling uh, passing defense. They did give up some yards on the ground, but um, they gave up the eighth fewest points per game. So just a very strong defensive core. And I don't think that there's any reason to believe that will change too much for them this season. I think that they will continue to be a strong presence in the league, both offense and defense. Now they unfortunately did have to trade away um, DeForest Buckner. They were running into salary cap issues. A lot of these guys they had were younger and starting to come into their own. They were going to need to be re-signed. They were on a salary cap restriction. They had to make a move, and so he was unfortunately the piece that fell. They were able to move him for an early first round pick. I believe it was the 13th pick, which they then later traded for the 14th pick, which they used to select the very first guy in the draft, Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle out of South Carolina. Uh, Anybody who follows this channel knows I go to the University of South Carolina, so you know, shout out to the alumni here. But
You just wait till this current class of 2022 of St. A's graduates, and you'll see St. Anselm College all over the place. They won 3 games in a row. It means that it's destined to be. They're all NFL bound.
Okay, alrighty. Anyways, Javon Kinlaw. He's got great size and long arms. He's got the potential to become an absolutely elite interior pass rusher. He's got a really quick first step, and he's got the power to jar offensive linemen on contact. He's shown the ability to effectively use his hands to get off blocks, and he locates the ball well as a run defender. He is listed as starting defensive tackle this season, so kind of they did have to trade DeForest Buckner, but they were kind of able to replace that position with immediately with the trade and for cheaper and kind of allow them to continue to stay young. Next up, also in the first round, so they only made 5 picks this year. 2 of them were in the first round. Later on in the first round, they went with Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver out of Arizona State. If I butchered that name, I apologize. He's got solid route running ability, and he has the ability to make a play after the catch. He's a bit on the shorter side, but he's got a good catching radius, especially when you consider his size. And he's also got outstanding body control. He tracks the ball well and is fast enough to stretch the defense vertically. So he's kind of going to be able to be a multi-level threat for this offense. And he also has the skill set to make an immediate impact on special teams as a punt returner. Matt, I know you had said something about him earlier. Do you want to chime in with your little...
Oh yes, so I was doing a little bit of research myself because I trying to be a little more active in these.
I also specifically asked him to, but it's fine. What?
Well, yes, you specifically asked me to, but I want to be more active in these. So, don't listen, man. I'm trying to make myself sound good. Just like fuck off.
Okay.
Thank you. Jesus fucking Christ, can't. Anyway, so it's no secret that the San Fran 49ers have had a significantly more impactful running offense. They have been spearheaded by their running core, which is why Jimmy Garoppolo, ranks. Actually, we were talking about it earlier. He ranks, well, obviously among quarterbacks like Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz. He also has like over 100 less passes than either of those quarterbacks. Now, one interesting thing about, and that all has a thing to do with not just that. I don't think this says anything about his throwing ability. He did have a pretty hard time throwing in the postseason, but also just giving himself more weapons, and specifically the way Mike Shanahan runs it, he likes to run lots of. Basically, he runs lots of slants and like vertical routes, which are where his particular abilities lie. And so the type of offense that he runs here, basically the way it breaks down is this guy's a top pick for like 4 or 5 teams, and a second and third round pick for basically everyone else. And so for the 49ers offensive scheme, he is a very good pick, and I think they made a smart decision here taking him based on the type of passing attack that they have.
I don't want to cut you off. Okay,
Yep, yeah, you're good.
I've allowed you sufficiently to
Fidge?
eat. Yes. Okay. Now, this is where I said we were going to talk about earlier, the Trent Williams trade. Because of the fact that Joe Staley did ultimately decide to retire, part of why this offense was so productive last season is they had such a strong offensive line for that running back core of, should I give Matt a little quiz and see if he can name me a single running back on the 49ers?
Should
No,
you
don't
quiz
be
me on it?
mean.
Yeah, don't be mean. Listen, I've contributed more than I usually do. Let's not get.
Raheem Mostert and Tyreek Coleman.
Yeah, actually, Mustard had that gigantic game in the off season.
Yeah,
So, or
in the
postseason,
off-season.
Jesus.
Postseason, yep. Anyways, part of why those
When you
that
talk
group,
about when you talk about football, do you say postseason or playoffs? I just say postseason for everything because of baseball.
it's kind of either or. I mean, I think most people probably say playoffs, but I mean, if you say postseason, I'll accept it. I'm not gonna be too
Okay.
mad about it. Anyways, part of the reason why this running back group was so productive, and part of the reason why Jimmy Garoppolo was also able to be so productive is they had such a strong offensive line group. Keep Jimmy Garoppolo on his feet as well as give the running backs that option to really open up the field a little bit. So they needed to continue that. So when they lost Joe Staley, they made a move to bring in Trent Williams to replace him at the tackles position. But unfortunately, in order to do that, they had to give up. I think Matt, did you? I didn't look at specifically how many picks they gave up, but I know they did give up quite a couple of
They
their.
gave away a third-round pick, and it's either a fifth or a fourth-round pick they gave up. They gave up 2 picks.
I think it's the fourth because they didn't select second, third, or fourth this season. So I'm gonna say they had to give up either way. They had to give up 2 middle-round picks in order to bring him in, which I think for the overall team makes a lot of sense. They needed to do it. But in terms of this video, where I'm going to remind you now, as I probably will remind you again at the end, I'm only grading specifically on the guys that they drafted and how the draft went for them. This is not a draft day. It's specifically on the draft and who they brought in as a rookie. So I'm not necessarily going to rate them harshly or in a good way for that. It's just a comment that is why they did not have as good of a or not as good. That's why they did not have as many draft picks as they potentially could have.
Yeah, and I will say, I think it made sense for them because the way that it broke down is Ayuk is very good for their offense, but Kinlaw trading up for him is considered on just general like blank rankings, not taking into consideration what teams need is a top 10 player, and so I think they got a high value player out of that pick for losing their picks.
Well, yeah, the first 2 picks that they did have were both productive, and we'll get more into this at the end of the video. But their first 2 picks were absolutely great picks, and they were very productive for this team, no question. I was just more commenting on the fact that keep in mind that they only made these 2 picks. They only had 2 picks because of the fact that they had to trade a few others to rebuff that offensive line so that they could be prepped for, hopefully, if you're a 49ers fan, another run at the Super Bowl. Anyways, we've gotten off topic for too long now. Next up, 5th round pick, Colton McKivitz, offensive tackle out of West Virginia. He's a little light for an offensive tackle position, and he doesn't quite have like great length or speed. He does get his hands inside well on pass protection, but he does tend to lose that inside leverage and get beat inside from time to time. He's also able to generate a good initial push in the run game, which is good for such a run-heavy offense. And he has the flexibility to play either tackle spot with the potential to move to a guard position. He is listed as a third-string right tackle, and I want to note, I think that in a vacuum, this pick made sense. They needed depth at the position, and he gives them depth all over the offensive line. I don't know that I personally, if I was drafting for the 49ers, which I am not, and there's a reason I am not, it's because these guys are all smarter than me. But I personally would not have traded away my mid-round picks for an offensive tackle, and then also went out and went out and drafted another offensive tackle. That's my personal thing. I feel like it's a little redundant. I'm also an idiot and a hot-headed New Jersey fuck who likes to make videos online. So there's that. Um, but I think he's got solid talent, and I think that he has the potential, at the very least, to be, good as a backup on some of these teams, um, as kind of time goes on, and he's able to kind of get up to an NFL speed. I just don't know if it was what the team needed after already having traded to pick up an offensive tackle. Next up, they went with Charlie Warner, tight end out of Georgia. He's got average speed and big hands. He's tough and an aggressive blocker who fights to sustain those blocks. He's listed as a tight end 3 behind George Kittle and Ross Dwelley. I would say he has the potential to move up to a tight end 2 if he shows promise. But he's going to have to show he wasn't necessarily known for his pass catching. I think I saw he only had something like 15 pass catch. Let me not say something stupid. I almost remember him only saying that he only had like 15, 11 passes in a season. Yeah. So he's not necessarily that pass catching guy, which I think is fine. When you have George Kittle on your roster, you don't necessarily need another tight end who's going to go out and catch the football. You need the kind of guy who's going to go get in the trenches and do some of the dirty work. So as long as he's good enough where they have to, they can't just leave him wide open like somehow George Kittle was on this play. He's going to be a productive piece on this offense whenever he gets on the field. Whenever you have somebody that's going to be willing to get down and dirty in the blocks like that, that's what you're looking to see, especially when you have such a threat at the tight end position already. You kind of need that guy who's willing to, put his hand in the dirt and just go fight for some yardage. And then next, and the final pick was Juwan Jennings, wide receiver out of Tennessee. Quick note about him: he moved from quarterback. After his high school career, he moved from quarterback to wide receiver as a freshman in college. He's got excellent size, but he's not necessarily known to be a speedster. He runs hard and he has great balance, as well as showing some good body control and being able to adjust to passes. But I would say he's very, very raw potential. He's listed as a third-string wide receiver right now, but this is definitely going to be a case of time is going to tell. And it's going to come down to how he's able to continue to transition to the wide receiver position as a whole, as well as get up to speed at an NFL level. But again, that's also a 7th-round pick, so you never really quite know what to expect from guys this late in the draft. So I'm not gonna hold that against him or the team. That's just gonna be something they're gonna have to wait and see how that all works itself out. But that is the only 5 picks that the 49ers made. So I guess now we can kind of get into for a few minutes the draft grade, which the reason why I asked Matt if he would be willing to put a little research in on this one is specifically because I didn't quite know what to make of this team's draft grade. I didn't know if I should include the trade for Trent Williams in the draft grade, which ultimately I decided not to. I'm going to stick with what I've been doing, which is purely based on the guys that they did wind up drafting, how I think that they did. And I also feel like it's kind of hard when you only have 5 picks and they're so spread out. You have 2 in the first round and then you don't pick again until the 5th round. It's kind of hard because those first 2 picks are essentially what your draft is. When you get down into rounds 5, 6, and 7, I would say mid to late round 5 is really when it starts to get bad. Is when you really are picking on raw potential. You're not gonna necessarily find a ton of guaranteed NFL ready prospects that late in the draft. Most of them have already been selected in the first couple of rounds, which is not a knock on any of the guys. They all have potential. There's a reason why they're all being scouted. There's a reason why they're all being drafted. They're just not necessarily NFL ready at this moment. So we kind of went back and forth for a little bit. And I made a comment. I actually think that depending on how you want to look at it, what you want to include, what you don't want to include, I really think that you can make an argument for anywhere on a draft grade level from a B- to an A. I legitimately think you can make an argument for anywhere in there depending on how you want to look at things and the angle that you take on it. I do believe Matt and I, did we agree on somewhere between a B and a B plus, leaning towards a B?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they, and I think they used their draft picks smart to trade up to where they got, and I think overall their selections were good, but their because they missed so many middle round picks, they didn't really get to draft a whole bunch of slots where they needed it. So yeah,
Yeah, I think it's important to note also that when I kind of go through these, I'm basing these picks, what I base these grades off of a lot of times is not necessarily how great the talent that they got um, from any given player. It's the value that they got out of those picks. So I value personally, what I've noticed is I tend to value like third and fourth round picks quite highly because of the fact that those are where I feel like you find a lot of sleepers that turn out to be kind of diamonds in the rough almost. Um, at least in terms of value that those teams get out of those players, it's all about are they going to be producers for that team in the upcoming season. And I feel like they find a lot of those kind of surprising guys, mid third round to mid fourth round. You feel like you can find a lot of those guys, and they didn't pick in there, so it kind of makes it hard because I mean at this point in time, right? We're all just drafting. We're all just making our grades based off of what they did in college, and if they were selected in the first round, they did some promising things in college to be selected in the first round. So, um, yeah, I think a B makes sense, especially given my kind of grading scale that I've been using, and I'm trying to stay consistent. I think that I think that the two picks that they did make in the first round make a lot of sense, and I think that they fit well within the team. And I think that they did also fill holes, right? So I think Brandon Ayuk could definitely fill the hole at a skill position at wide receiver. Like I mentioned, he's at wide receiver 3 behind Debo Samuel and Kendrick Bourne, right? So they definitely could have. They definitely needed that kind of third guy there, as alongside obviously they have George Kittle, but you kind of need that wide receiving core too to be able to be productive. And Javon Kinlaw, I think Matt said he was listed as a top 10 overall talent. Is that what you said?
yep.
Yeah. So getting him at 14, that's they did good to move up and get him there, and also it makes sense. They traded away a defensive lineman to get him, and they got one back. So. Um, Overall, I think they did well, but I think that their just overall lack of picks is kind of what hurt this specific grade. But that does not necessarily mean I think they had a bad offseason. I'm going to remind you again, this is purely based on the picks that they made in the draft. It is not reflective of what I think their offseason was or how I think the team will do this upcoming season. And also, again, we do not own the highlight video that was playing throughout this video. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out in the description down below. I'll make sure that the link is in there. Also in the description, the link to our Discord and our social medias. We're not necessarily active on Twitter or Instagram, but we're definitely active on Discord. So come on over and say hi. And then really quickly, let's talk about next week. Next week, we've kind of got a jam-packed week. There will be 8 videos out next week, as opposed to the normal 5. We on Monday, we have both the Bucks and the Rays, Tampa Bay Bucks and Tampa Bay Rays coming out on Monday. Tuesday is just the Tennessee Titans. Wednesday is just the Philadelphia Phillies. Thursday, we go to the currently nameless Washington football team, as well as the New York Yankees. And then on Friday, we wrap up these 2 series with the Philadelphia Eagles. So make sure to come check those out. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Peace.